Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. Today I'm going to be talking about the episode The Chicken Thief. This episode was from season 2 and was directed by Ralph Senensky. If you are enjoying these, please do hit like and subscribe. For those of you who don't know, Ralph Senensky has a wonderful blog that he has written about all of the episodes of television and film that he has directed. It's well worth a read. In the case of The Chicken Thief, this is what Ralph had to say. The Chicken Thief, when I read it, I realized was a television script unlike those I had been receiving. In the decades since I had begun directing film, I had seen the early scripts that had been influenced by live television change into a more action-driven style, more intent on exciting than in probing the human psyche. The Chicken Thief was a return to the study of human behavior. He goes on to say, I was to learn the extra step taken to arrive at that high quality, a step never found taken in any other production. 2 or 3 days prior to the beginning of photography, the 5 adults in the cast, Richard Thomas, Ralph Waite, Michael Learned, Will Geer, and Ellen Corby, would assemble in producer Robert Jack's office during a lunch hour. With series creator Earl Hamner and story editor Carol McKeon present, the script was read by the 5 actors, which gave Earl and Carol a chance to hear the words of dialogue. After that, a discussion was held. Any objections the actors might have had were offered. Any ideas for something new to be added were requested. It was a way of adding texture to an already rich script and a deterrent to possible future rewriting on the set. So that answers the question some of you have had about whether or not there was a table read. So as Ralph mentions, the table read only included the adult actors in the series. Ralph continues, he says, episodes of The Waltons were filmed in 6.5 days. The Chicken Thief started at the half day after lunch. My first scene was in the Walton kitchen with 8 of the 10 members of the family involved. Did I spend that final morning of my prep reviewing my plans for my first sequence of this brand new show? No. I remember my biggest problem was trying to sort out those damn kids. I didn't have any problem with Richard Thomas. I had directed Richard 2 years earlier when he guest starred on the FBI. I knew he was John Boy. But I didn't want to go on a set and say to the others, hey, you! So I spent a half day drilling myself to learn that John was Jason, Eric was Ben, David was Jim Bob, but the real killers, Cammie was Elizabeth, Mary Elizabeth McDonough was Aaron, and Judy was Mary Ellen. Well done, Ralph. Early in the episode, John Boy stops by Ike's store and finds Grandpa shooting pool with Yancy Tucker, played by Robert Donner. Now, Grandpa makes a couple of pool shots here. I'm not sure that Will Geer played pool, but I do know when you get a couple of these sorts of edits going on, in one case you see Will line up a shot and you see him take the shot. Then there's an opportunity there for a separate shot where you see the ball go into the pocket. So those could be 2 completely different shots, and probably were. Now, whether Will made the shot that actually went into the pocket or whether someone else took that shot and how many takes it took to get that shot, for that ball to actually go into the pocket, who knows? A little bit later on, you see Will take another shot, and it seems that the camera pans down and then follows the ball into the pocket. So in this case, it would give the impression that Will had made that shot. Now, whether it was done in 1 take or 10 takes or 20 takes, I don't know. They had the opportunity, obviously, to do a cutaway in a separate edit. So it must not have taken too many shots, or they probably would have moved on to plan B. While at Ike's store, he gives John Boy a letter for Ben. And it turns out that it is a letter from Liberty Magazine, which is a magazine that Ben has been selling subscriptions to, but that's not what this letter is about. An opportunity to see editing in play. In this case, you see John Boy coming down the stairs, and you're shooting through the screen door. So this would have been shot on stage 26, so an interior, because you can see into the house and clearly see up those stairs. So he comes down and he exits. Then they would have, at a different time on the back lot of the studio, shot the exterior of the house when John Boy actually exits and you see him come down off the porch. So that would have involved making sure that at the time that they shot the second part of that, now which one they shot first, I don't know. They might have shot the outside thing first and then later on been on the soundstage and shot the interior. But in either case, it meant that everybody connected with hair, wardrobe, makeup, had to make sure that everything that Richard was wearing, how he looked, all matched so that those two edited together seamlessly. Ralph had this to say about the locations. Our third day of filming was a location day. We went to Cuddy Farm in Lake of the Woods, California. So this was basically what I referred to a lot of times as Fraser Park. That was the larger area, and the Cuddy Ranch was a location we used at times. And we used that location, I believe also this particular location, when G.W. Haynes, when we saw where his family lived. I think we might have also used this location when in the calf. So we frequently reused locations in different episodes, and they weren't always the same person's farm. Ralph said that Lorimar, our production company, had no objection to filming day for night. And when it came to filming night scene exteriors like the ones we were doing, I agreed with them. So day for night basically means you're shooting during the day, but you're shooting night sequences. I thought that filming during the day with night filters produced a moonlight effect that was more realistic than filming at night with spotlight beams projecting from behind trees. The following day, we did have a major tragedy. Half of the film was destroyed at the lab during developing. No problem. We returned to the location for added filming, and I think the tab for that was picked up by the lab's insurance. This sequence involves John Boy seeing Yancy come out of Charlie's chicken coop carrying 2 chickens. Yancy sees John Boy. John Boy sees Yancy. Yancy knows John Boy's seen him, and then he runs off. Then when Charlie comes out, having heard all the commotion near the chicken coop, and asks if John Boy saw anything, John Boy lies to him, basically, or is very evasive and says, no, I didn't see anyone. It's dark out. The kids are all walking home from school. Mary Ellen is talking to John Boy, telling him that GW said something very romantic, and does John Boy want to hear what it was? And John Boy's not interested. And then I make some reference to Ben acting like a grump. This is what Ralph Senensky had to say about shooting that sequence. 3 camera dolly setups to film 38 seconds of bantering dialogue while traipsing down a dusty road. And just to remind that Ben is acting strangely. And he says that never would have happened back at QM Productions, which was Quinn Martin, who he worked for in other series. Yancy comes by to talk to John Boy and basically says he knows that John Boy saw him and that he is really kind of taking these chickens, and he borrowed them, basically. And that in a sense, he considers him sort of a modern day Robin Hood. So very much like the character of Charlie Sneed in The Homecoming. And Yancy says to not put John Boy on the spot. He will return those chickens. And John Boy's like, okay, that works for him. We find out that Charlie has been shot by a chicken thief. And so John and John Boy, thinking that Yancy may somehow be involved in this, and knowing that Charlie has told Epp that that's who he suspects, they try to find Yancy before the sheriff does. And there's a lovely montage as they go around and talk to various different people in the community. And one of the people they stop by and see is Maud Gormley, played by the wonderful Marie Earle. And Marie was so fascinating. I don't think she really started acting professionally till she was nearly 80. And she first appeared in season 1 in The Minstrel, and here she is again in this episode. The sheriff does catch up with Yancy and arrests him. John and John Boy want to go find out from Yancy what the story is and defend him if they can. And because they really don't believe that he did this. When they get to the jail, they find out that Yancy has all these visitors, all these people in the community that he has helped by taking them food or chickens or eggs when they were in real need, have come by to bring food to Yancy and keep him company, including a woman who apparently is a love interest. And it was the character of Jane Aspen. And I thought, oh gosh, she looks very familiar. And it turns out it was indeed Sissy Wellman, who came back later in the series to play Sissy, who ends up marrying Yancy. So a different character, but same actress and Robert Donner's wife in real life. After all of the visitors leave, John and John Boy have a chance to talk to Yancy, and they're going to see about getting him out of there. And he's like, there's worse places to be. I'm getting fed. I have lots of company. And he doesn't want John Boy to be involved in this. So if John Boy says, that he knows something, then Yancy feels like it pulls John Boy in. And it also means that he will be arrested for real and thrown in jail for being a chicken thief. So at this point, he feels like he will be exonerated if he just gives it a little bit of time, and that way he will not do real prison time and John Boy won't be involved. They see the logic of this and leave Yancy to his plan. Ben finally confesses to Olivia, to Mama, that this letter from Liberty magazine was basically saying that he had won a poetry contest that was for all of the sales boys. Olivia is very proud of him, but he confesses that it actually was a poem of John Boy's, and he feels like he stole John Boy's poem, and so he feels bad about all of this, and what should he do? And she says, well, you should tell John Boy this. Ben does end up going to John Boy and confessing, and shows him the poem that he wrote and the poem that John Boy originally wrote. And John Boy says, well, you completely rewrote it. You just took the idea. And that writers do that all the time. They take an idea from another writer and they rewrite it completely in their own vein. But, ideas come from everywhere. So he makes Ben feel better and congratulates him on the poem that he wrote and hopes that John Boy, he too, will be published sometime soon. John Boy goes to talk to Charlie to see if he can find out any more information about what happened when he was shot. Charlie's griping about how he can't do any of his chores, and John Boy says, well, I have an afternoon free. I will do your chores for free. So he does, and during the time that he is doing those chores, all these various different neighbors that Yancy helped come by and return chickens, return eggs, all kinds of things. And Charlie keeps seeing all this happening. And I think he doesn't quite know what to make of all of it. John shows up to talk to Charlie and mentions that Dr. Vance said that Charlie was shot with a .22 and that he's been shooting with Yancy a lot of times, and that's not what Yancy uses. But he does know that Charlie has a .22. And so Charlie confesses that through a series of incidents, he accidentally tripped and shot himself, but then he was too embarrassed to say it. So it gets Yancy off the hook there. There's a whole fun sequence at the end of the episode where the edition of Liberty magazine has arrived with the poem of Ben's, and all of the children come running to hear the poem, see Ben's name in print, and you see Aaron hop off the seesaw and Jim Bob fall off. You see Jason and Jim Bob come down out of the hayloft, and that just looked like such fun coming down on that rope. I'm sure somebody taught them how to do it, and they seem to have no problem and were probably having terrific fun. I wish I'd gotten to do that. Sounded like something that I would have enjoyed. Anyway, we all gather on the porch, very much like in the opening sequence when we all ran and gathered around the radio. And we look at Ben's name in print, and John Boy reads the poem out loud, and we all celebrate Ben's success. I appreciate Ralph Senensky's input on this episode. I found it very enlightening, and I hope you did too. And that's what I have for you for this segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons about the Chicken Thief. I'll be back with more Behind the Scenes of the Waltons and more Ask Judy. Thanks for watching.